Okay, so now that we have our joints oriented the correct way, by the way, if you're confused on why we're orienting our joints, I'll leave a link in the description to a website that kind of explains exactly why this is really important. So make sure you read that because it's good to know why you're doing things. So let's go ahead now and in the outliner, make sure you select all your joints. So make sure you expand all these guys so that you can select them all, and then select the joint and shift click on the mesh. So what I did is I changed back my mesh so that I can actually select it. So with that done, go to skin and then click on bind skin, and that's going to bind our joints to our mesh. So let's go ahead and do that. So with that done, as you can see now, if you click on one of the joints and let's do a rotate, you can see now that our mesh also moves along with the rotation that we're doing here. So obviously it's not going to be perfect because it's just automatically done by Maya, although I mean it's looking pretty good, but eventually we're going to do it ourselves. But anyway, as you can see now, our mesh is bound to our joints. So next we're going to create an IK handle. So basically right now when we do something like this, when we move that guy then we switch to the next guy, this is called FK, so forward kinematics, which means that to move the entire arm, all the joints, you have to go one by one. And then IK means if you move one joint, it's going to move the other joints with it. So let me show you what I mean by that. So let's go ahead and do that. So go to, make sure you are set to rigging here under your shelf, and click on create IK handle. I believe it's also under skeleton. I believe that's the one. So I'm going to click on this one. With that selected, we're going to click on the hip and then all the way to this one. So you go from this one to this one. Now if you press the W key to move, you see that we get something like this. So this is known as IK. So it means I move this guy and then this guy moves by itself. So that's cool. So now that we know that works, make sure you undo so that your character goes back to its normal pose. So let's do the same thing for the right leg. So let's click on IK handle, click on this one at the top, and then there. And now, oops, you have to make sure you're clicking on the handle. So under the here in the outliner, they're going to show up down here. As you can see, that guy's working as well. So now let's go ahead and do the same thing, but this time for the arms. So let's click on IK. We're going to start at the shoulder and go all the way to the wrist here. So there we go. Undo that. Oops, I think I undid the whole thing. Let me go back. Now let's go ahead and do the one on the right. So click on IK. Cool. So in the outliner we're going to have our IK handles here. And let's go ahead and just rename these guys. So let's rename this one to IK underscore L for left, and then leg. This one's Cool, so now we have our handles named correctly so that we can, know which one's which, and we know that they work correctly. Okay, so next thing we're going to create a control or controller for our foot joint here. So let's do that. Let's go to create nurbs, curves, and let's just do a circle. Okay. Now what we want to do is we want to snap this guy to our foot. So what I'm going to do is let me click on the visibility for my model and just make that disappear. And I'm going to enable, let's see, I think it's point snapping, which is this guy. So make sure this is selected, and we're going to drag this guy here so that it's exactly in the same spot as our leg, as our foot. And now we can just, let me enable my character back, and then we can just scale this guy just so that we get a shape of the foot. Go to control vertex, then just shape this guy. It doesn't really matter what you shape it, but let me disable this. Like, you can shape this however you want. It's just to make it easier to select. So that should be good. Okay, and we want to name this guy. Let's name it, well, it has to have the same name as our joint. So this is foot J, and we're going to paste the same name but name it control. Just abbreviate that. And now I'm going to duplicate this guy, so control D to duplicate it. I'm going to disable visibility here and do the snapping right here. Snap to point so that it snaps exactly on the same spot. Disable that. Enable my character model again. And now we have that, and rename this one to right. Let me delete the one at the end. There we go. So now we have that, and we want to do one more thing. We want to freeze transformations on this. So right now it has transformations, so we absolutely do not want that. Never want your controllers to have transformations when you're not animating. So let's go to modify freeze transformations. Select this guy and do the same thing. So as you can see now, everything's 0, 0, 0, and the scale is 1. So now what we want to do is we want to connect this controller to our IK handle, which is this case this guy. So what I'm going to do is click on the left foot controller and hold down control and click on the let's see, yeah, that's correct. Okay, yeah, let's click on the left foot controller and hold down control and click on the IK left leg. Now what we want to do is we want to create a orientation. So let's go to, we want to go to constraint and then just click on point constraint. And then while we have those still selected, let's go to constraint and now orient constraint. So as you can see now, if you click on the controller or the curve here, you can actually move the IK handle. So that's pretty cool, right? And you can even rotate it if you want it. It's not working. So the good thing about this is that we can always, because we freeze transformations, it doesn't matter how we set it up. If you have it back here, for example, you can always come back here and just set this to 0 to get it back into, regular position. So let's go ahead and do the same thing for the other one. So it's a right foot controller and then click on the right IK. Let's do the same. Let's do constraint point and then constraint orient. And as you can see now, this guy controls our leg. So we no longer need to use our joints to move our character. We now use controllers. So that's the reason. So whenever you animate stuff, you don't want to be animating the actual joints, because the joints already have translations and they're not the translations are not completely frozen, therefore you can't really go back to square one. If you animate these guys, you wouldn't know what the original translations were. But when you use controllers, these guys have already been set to 0 translations and rotations. So if you want to go back to the original pose, you can always just come back here and then just reset your translate and rotate numbers. So that's basically why you always want to create controllers instead of just using the joints to animate. By the way, I just realized I made a mistake while I was doing this, so which is good, even someone like me can make mistakes, and it's good that I made that mistake so I can show you how to fix it. So what I'm going to do is I'm going to delete my constraints because I messed up. So let me delete that. So make sure you delete constraints on the IK handles. Let's redo this. Let's click on the left foot and then the left IK, and let's do the point orient. Where I messed up was where I told you to have them just selected and then just do an orient. That's not what we want. What we want now is to select the the controller, then click on the foot joint, the actual joint, not the IK. So click on the curves and then the foot joint. Let's go to constraint orient, but let's click on the options box and just make sure that the maintain offset is on, because if it's not on, let me show you. If it's not on and I apply it, it's gonna mess up my leg and I don't want that. But if we click on maintain offset and then apply, it's all good now. So basically what I messed up last time was that I didn't orient constraint on the IK joint, but the IK joint is not doing rotation, so it's not doing this. So if you do that, if you did it the way I did it and then try to rotate with the controller, you wouldn't be able to do this rotate. But now it's set up correctly, so that then we can move this guy and then and then just rotate it, and then that works fine. Let me set this back to 0. So good. So let's do that one here. Let's do it right this time. So right foot controller, and then control on the IK one first. For the IK, we'll do the point constraint, and then click on the controller. Now on the foot, so shift click on the foot joint, and now we do the orient constraint, making sure the maintain offset is on. And let's test this guy. Good. So this guy works fine. We can rotate the actual leg, the actual foot, and then if we want to set it back to where it was, again, just because we're using a controller, we can just set all these guys back to 0. So cool. So now we have our legs done here, which is pretty good. Okay, so guess what, guys? We're going to do the exact same thing for our hands. So let's do that. We can create a controller first. Let's do a circle, and then just move this guy up here. You can rotate it however you want. Scale this guy down. And by the way, guys, you can change the shape of this guy if you want. Like, it doesn't really matter what the like, you can do something like this. It doesn't really matter what the shape of the actual controller is. But anyway, we want to snap this guy to our wrist. So let me deselect the let me hide the geometry here. Once again, enable point snap to points, and then just snap this guy here. Let me enable back this guy, and we can probably do something like this. So there we go. And all we have to do now is duplicate it and snap that to our other side, like that. And then we can just name it. So let's do that. This one is our controller. Now let's do the other one. It has to be, make sure you use the same name as the joint, just so that you know which ones correspond to which. There we go. And make sure you freeze transformations again, that's super important. Freeze transformations on that guy, and then on this guy, freeze transformations. And now we're going to do the exact same thing. Let's go here under the outliner, make sure we have the left wrist selected, and then let's see, this one's the left arm. I should probably have named this differently, it should have been left hand. Let's do that, that probably makes more sense. So okay, we have the left wrist controller, hold down control, then click on the IK for the left hand. And let's do the point orient first. So point orient. And now select the controller and shift click on the wrist joint. And let's do the orient constraint, making sure that our maintain offset is on. Apply that and close. And as we can see now, we can control the arm and rotation of the wrist and the hand by using our controller. Let's go ahead and do the exact same thing on the other side. Start with the right wrist controller, hold down control and click on the IK, make sure it's the IK, use a point orient, and now let's click on the curbs, which is the controller for the wrist, and then hold down shift, click on the joints for the wrist, and orient constraint. And make sure you test it to make sure this is working the way oh, let me deselect the snap to point here so I can move it freely. So there we go. Isn't that freaking awesome? We got full control of our legs and full control of our arms. So next we want to do control of the spine. So the next thing we want to do is we want to create an IK handle for the spine. So let's do that. Let's go to skeleton, and then this time let's use the create IK spline handle. So with that selected, let's click on the hip first, so this guy at the bottom, and then let's click all the way to this guy right here. There we go. So now we have that, and let's go ahead and name it spine. And if we want to test it to see that it's working, what we want to do is have that selected and press F8 on your keyboard, then just drag on this guy, and then we can see that if we move it to the side, then to the bottom, so there we go. So now we know it works. So now that we have that tested, as you can see too, if you in the outliner, when you created that spline IK, you also get a curve which is for our spine. So let's name that so let's just name it spine curve, and we want to move the pivot point of that to the hip. So if you hold down D on your keyboard, you can just kind of drag it up here, and let's make sure you enable the point snap to point. So hold down D and snap this guy. Hide that. Okay, so it looks like it's been snapped correctly. So cool, so that's all good. So now let's go ahead and create a controller for our hip. So let's go to create nurbs circle. Now we want to snap the this guy to the hips. Let me disable geometry so I can see better. Make sure you have snap to point so that we can snap this guy exactly on the hip. There we go. And you can, you can scale this guy however you want. And make sure to freeze transformations. And we also want to name this guy. Oops. Let's name this hip controller, so that we know what this guy does. So now what we want to do is we want to select the hip controller and then hold down shift, or just hold down control and click on the spine curve, and let's do a constraint point. So now what we want to do is we want to select the hip again, and then on the spine curve, and let's go to constraint orient options box. What we want to do is we want to set this to constraint on the X and Z axis only, so apply that. Okay, so now what we want to do is we want to open the go to window, general editor, then go to connection editor. So with this open, what we want to do is we want to click on the hip controller and click here where it says reload left, and then deselect that guy, and then click on the IK spine and then click on reload right. What we want to do is we want to look here on the left, we're going to look for rotate, so it's right here. Then on this side we want to look for roll, which is right here. So on the rotate, make sure you expand it and then click on rotate Y, and then on roll. So now these guys are turned blue, and you can see here too under the channel box, the roll has a yellow mark, which shows us that there's now a connection between the rotate Y and the roll for that. So let's go ahead and close that now that we have that connection established. And by the way, you want to test it now. As you can see, this is for our spine, and you can move this guy down. So our hip controller is working a-okay. So now let's go ahead and make another curve. So let's go to create circle, and I want to snap this guy to I'll snap it to that guy right there. So that's our chest. And I mean, you can shape this guy if you want to. And you can do this however you want, really. You can go as crazy as you want with the shapes. But anyway, let me scale this guy just a little bit like this. And go to modify freeze transformations. Make sure you always freeze transformations on your controllers. So let's name this guy chest controller. So now we want to connect this guy. So to do that, let's go ahead and open the connection editor one more time. So general editors, connection editor, and with the chest controller selected, reload left, and now let's select the IK spine and reload right, and let's look for rotate just right here, and we're going to click on rotate Y, and then on the right side let's look for twist, which is right here. There we go. And now we can see here that there's a connection. So now there's the connection there. So as we can see, now we can twist this guy around. Okay, so now if you can see now that we can rotate our hip, but when we do that, you will notice that this guy stays behind. This guy doesn't move, and we want that to move. So what we want to do is we want to change the our hierarchy here. So we want the chest controller to be inside our hip controller. To do that, use the middle mouse click and drag, and just place that guy in there, inside the hip controller. So now, as you can see now, if I rotate my hip, the chest controller also rotates, which is pretty good, and this is what we want. And we're going to do the same thing with the hand controllers. We're going to get the hand controllers inside our chest. So let's drag that inside there. Let's do the same with the right wrist inside the chest controller, so that if we move the chest controller, the hands also come with it.